Today we have the opportunity of introducing you to Dr. Louis Ignarro, the 1998 Nobel Prize winner in medicine.
When I was in Europe, actually when I was in Naples, Italy, which is where my dad was born many years ago, this is when I first heard about the announcement of the Nobel Prize. And actually I refused to believe it until my colleague who had invited me to give a lecture showed me on the computer in the internet at the Nobel site that I was awarded the Nobel Prize in medicine. The Nobel Prize ceremony is unbelievable. It's celebrated in December. It's always celebrated on December 10th, which is the anniversary of Alfred Nobel's death. So it's a whole about 8 or 9 days of ceremony. So we give lectures, I think, on the 8th of December. We meet all kinds of interesting people, and of course we get a chance to converse with the other Nobel laureates. And then the ceremony is spectacular. It's held at the concert hall. Of course, it's attended and hosted by the king and the queen of Sweden. It's just a fantastic event. But one of the greatest feelings I ever had was getting up and walking to King Carl Gustav and receiving the Nobel Prize from his hands. That was a very moving moment for me, as was a couple of days later in the terminating ceremony, where I was actually asked to sign my name to a very special book that had the signatures of all of the Nobel laureates who preceded me from 1901 through 1997. And what they do is they ask you to flip through the pages first and look at all the names and signatures of the prior Nobel laureates. And then when you get to the last page and you see your own printed name, you sign your name with a special pen that they give you. And I remember flipping through the pages and seeing all kinds of names, Madame Curie, for example, all kinds of people, Ernest Hemingway. The one name that really got to me, though, was Albert Einstein, because I suddenly realized for the first time that I was going to be signing my name to the same book signed by Albert Einstein, and I added my name to that long list of incredible names.
Now, Dr. Ignarro, when asked, how did he discover nitric oxide? This is what he had to say.
Now on the American Health Journal. An amazing discovery has proven vital to cardiovascular health. Nitric oxide. Our executive producer, Roland Perez, interviewed the winner of the 1998 Nobel Prize in Medicine on this recent discovery.
Nitric oxide was a molecule I wasn't studying until the late 1970s. My colleague who shared the Nobel Prize, Fred Murad, had discovered that nitric oxide could elevate the cellular levels of an important signaling molecule called cyclic GMP. And we became interested in how this might occur. We knew that drugs like nitroglycerin, which had been used since the days of Alfred Nobel 150 years ago to treat hypertension and treat heart pain, we knew the drug worked very well, but the mechanism of action was unknown. So we thought that perhaps the nitro part of nitroglycerin might somehow be converted in the body to nitric oxide. And so we did some key experiments, and we showed that nitroglycerin can be metabolized, if you will, to nitric oxide in the smooth muscle of the arteries. And we then showed that nitric oxide was the active principle responsible for the vasodilating action of the nitroglycerin. So this is how we first started to look at NO, because we suspected nitroglycerin might work through a nitric oxide mechanism. And what this led to, very simply, was the recognition that nitric oxide is such a potent vasodilator in the body, and we couldn't understand why our body would have receptors to interact with an outside chemical like nitric oxide, unless our bodies made nitric oxide, but we didn't know about it. So we set out on a 5-year project. It turned out to be 5 years to try to find and isolate a nitric oxide-like substance in the body. And that's when we discovered that the arteries, the endothelial cells of the arteries, actually make nitric oxide, the same nitric oxide that's generated from nitroglycerin. Once we meaning the scientific community, appreciated the protective effects of nitric oxide in the cardiovascular system, the question asked was, well, how can we stimulate our own nitric oxide production? So many drug companies set off, and they're still working on this, trying to develop prescription drugs for stimulating nitric oxide production. But after understanding the way nitric oxide is produced in the body, we had the idea that we could get by with non-prescription drugs, amino acids, antioxidants, and so on, to stimulate the production of nitric oxide. And what we found was that simple amino acids like arginine and like citrulline, when combined with certain antioxidants like vitamin C and vitamin E, when all of these are taken together, they can markedly boost the production of nitric oxide and also stabilize the nitric oxide, preventing it from being inactivated by those oxygen radicals that I was telling you about. So this is one very simple way to stimulate one's own nitric oxide production. But there are other things one can do as well. For example, it's well appreciated in the past few years now that exercise is the body's principal way to increase nitric oxide production.
Interesting enough, Alfred Nobel, who dedicated his life to finding a use for nitroglycerin, led to the discovery of dynamite, and he became a multimillionaire. Late in life, in his 50s, early 60s, he developed coronary artery disease. Went to his cardiologist. What did he recommend? Nitroglycerin. Alfred Nobel refused to take it. Why? Because his father and brother both died in tragic accidents in working with nitroglycerin, and he knew how dangerous it was. At age 64, he died of a massive heart attack, and because he was a workaholic and never married, never had a family, he left behind all his money. So they put it in a Swiss bank account, and the interest alone from that account goes to pay for all the Nobel Prizes. How ironic that 100 years later, Dr. Louis Ignarro, along with two other American scientists, would win the Nobel Prize on working with nitroglycerin as well. Isn't that funny? And yet, if we look at this gentleman here, this is Lyndon B. Johnson, one of our ex-presidents. And Lyndon B. Johnson, late in life, which, remember, 50 to 60 is not late in life if you're going to live 120 years. Actually, it's halfway home. So halfway home, he also developed coronary artery disease. He took nitroglycerin. In fact, he took so much nitroglycerin that you would see him taking it while delivering a State of the Union address, while delivering a speech on television. Well, ladies and gentlemen, he died at age 64 of a massive heart attack. So it didn't matter whether you took it or didn't. Nitroglycerin is not the cure, but nitric oxide is the cure.